interest.
And do you just do it all in one take, Alex?
Yeah,
we just
usually,
go.
Usually,
So if we,
and then if we fuck up, it's fine.
so if we're
We
about to
just
say
cut
something we
it out.
shouldn't have said.
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
can-
so I
it's
do
fine.
that all the time. So
Okay.
I did Andrew Daddo last week, and we talked about the shark attack because he's a surfer. And then he rang me back in a panic. He goes, "Can we please edit out the shark attack stuff? Like, I live on the northern beaches. They'll come for me like a mob."
Probably shark
So
mafia.
if you stuff up, just stop, give a couple of seconds gap, start again.
Yep. So we
Okay.
can just edit out anything you want. It's not like this is not hard news where we're trying to catch you. Like
not
we're trying,
Watergate. Yep.
we're trying to have a
Do something positive.
Yeah, we're trying to do something that helps because it's so hard for people to actually get this information.
Yeah.
Right? It's really, really challenging.
Yep.
And when the last interview I did with you, I was like, look at all these great little shorts I've got. And they were like, they just don't look nice enough to put up. And I was like, they do. It looks really good. And then I went, I'm going to get him back for the
Yeah.
studio because it's so important to get this. No,
Yeah.
It's so hard to do.
And if you could put a few graphics in, Alex, for Andrew's stuff in particular, I think that's what makes them look so clear
Yeah, I agree.
and appetizing to a viewer or, someone
Yeah.
listening or watching.
Well, Stephen's
Anyway.
graphics about longevity, they're really scary. You've seen the way
But it stops you in your tracks, don't they?
a 65-year-old woman has a 50% chance of living to, I think I wrote it down, 90.
Say that again. I want to listen to that one.
Yeah, it's a 50% chance of living to 85, 75, another 25% chance of living to something like 94, 10% chance of 99.
Wow.
And this is without longevity improvement.
Exactly, and that's what he was telling me. He
Wow.
goes, and he goes, you've got to look at the model. And I'm like, no, you're an actuary.
Please
so
don't
you say
tell
that.
Tell me what I need to know. Wow.
So yeah, he's very big on that.
Yeah.
Which I find just fascinating. Anyway,
Right.
let's
Start.
stop wasting the good
Yeah,
stuff.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, they're very big. The mics.
That's all right.
They're very black. Yeah, but that's all right.
That's all right.
You're watching The Midlife Shift with Alex Brooks, and this episode will dive into the smart moves you can make in your 50s to live better in another decade or 2 or 3 or 4, depending on how long you're going to live. Hit the bell to like, subscribe, and follow for all the juicy conversations to thrive after 50. Now, where's my number 2? There it is. Okay. Your home and where you live could be the secret weapon to plan a great retirement. Today, we have the amazing superannuation guru, Andrew Boll, and national property editor from Domain, Alice Stoltz, here to chat with us. Andrew, I don't think there's anything you don't actually know about superannuation. Now, with more of us taking a mortgage or renting as we move into retirement, what's going to change for our generation versus the way our parents moved into retirement, do you think?
Well, before we go to the mortgage part, there's a big change happening around superannuation just generally. So it got to 9% in 2002.
Yeah.
It's just gone to 12% now.
So we're getting good money in
So we're
super,
now
is
getting
what you're
good money.
saying.
But go back, for people who are retiring now, most of the money had super in the last 20 to 30 years. And so what the future generations, in 20 years' time, people retiring will have had a whole career at 9% or more. So at the moment, last year, about 60% of retirees had less than $250,000
Yes.
in super.
The accumulated amount you're
Accumulated
talking about.
at retirement.
Yeah, your lump
In
sum.
20 years' time, they'll less than 20% of people will be in that situation, and more than 60% of people will retire with more than $500,000 in today's terms. So we're going to have more money in retirement. Now, it's to
bigger
supplement what we've got
pool
in the
of
house.
money.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. So people's expectations about retirement are going to change a lot as they have this amount of money sitting there. And so the big challenge for the industry is working out how do we help them draw down that money efficiently and get the most out of it.
Now, efficiently is a real actuary word,
It
isn't
is.
it? Because not many people understand what an actuary is, but you're kind of like analog data scientists who are maths gurus and you understand risk and probability and efficiency. And tell us what an actuary is in real words. Tell us.
In real words, so we look at data
Yeah.
from the past and analyse that to see what we can then make of the future. So the catch cry for the industry is we use data for good.
Okay.
So we try to understand data to help people make better decisions about their future.
It's pretty good. Now, Alice, who is not a maths guru, but is also married to an actuary, What do you think an actuary does, Alice?
It feels like I've got a conflict of interest, doesn't it, when you say it like that, doesn't it? I think an actuary looks at trends and events that have happened in the past to predict the future.
Yeah.
So I sort of think part clairvoyant, part historian, and kind of does it with a lot more sort of substance to it than that.
Yes.
But and the thing that makes me think sort of creatively about actuaries is how do they predict the future when we've gone through sort of such erratic times?
Yeah.
I suppose, we know a pandemic once every 100 years or whatnot, but there have been quite a lot of events recently in the past sort of decade or so that have been anomalies, and it makes me wonder how sort of actuaries work through that.
Yeah, that's funny because one of the first jobs I did, in the early 80s. Seriously.
all right.
Because, I think these sort of events happen at different points in time and you've got to do your best you can with the numbers you have available at the time.
Yep.
So when HIV/AIDS first came out,
Grim Reaper.
there's, I've forgotten the number now, there was a few thousand people contracted AIDS from blood transfusions.
That's right.
From the Red Cross.
Yep. Medically acquired
So the
HIV.
government provided some money to help those victims, to compensate them for the error that they contracted it through a blood transfusion. And so then my job with other actuaries was to work out an efficient way to distribute that money to those people to meet their needs, but also to make sure it didn't run out.
Yeah, totally.
And so it's an interesting way to sort of work out with numbers the probabilities that someone's going to get really sick from HIV at this point and then live for, is it going to live for 3 months or 9 months or 2 years?
Okay.
And do we give them an income or just a lump sum? What's the best way to give them the money?
And now the really interesting thing about all of this and why we're here is because superannuation is like the ultimate kind of future-based risk or efficiency model that kind of defines the way you live out life. There's no retirement age in Australia, 60, 65, 67 are sort of some milestone ages, but there's no rules that say you have to give up work or retire. But there's this concept now that we have to financially retire in some way. We have to work out how we might look after ourselves in our later years. Sometimes they call them the golden years, which makes me want to go, I hate that term. But superannuation is the ultimate risk model, right?
Yeah.
Everyday people who don't even really know what an actuary does, what should they be thinking about their super?
So I want to break the community down into 3 groups.
Okay.
So at one end, we have a proportion of the community, maybe 20, 25%, who are going to be eligible for the age pension in full from the day they retire.
That's from 67 though at the
From
moment.
67. And then they're going to have a bit of super, but they're probably going to have 100,000 or 200,000. That'll help and it'll be good, but 80% of their income in retirement is going to come from the age pension.
Yep.
And so that will probably look after most of their needs.
Except that ASFA, the Australian
Superannuation funds.
I was going to say, I know you know the ASFA. They just put out the new numbers. If you rent when you're 67, you actually need at least 340 grand accumulated in your super. And bizarrely, if you had that, you could probably buy a house if house prices weren't so astronomical, right?
So this is a big issue, is about the equity between home ownership versus renting. So we've been calling for a long time, and the last couple of years we've got it. So in 2023, they increased Commonwealth rent assistance by 15% above CPI.
Yeah.
Then in 2024, another 10%.
Needs to
There
be
still
higher though,
needs more than that.
Yeah,
and
by
at the same
miles.
time, home equity, the value of your own home is exempt from the means test.
Exactly. It's so unfair.
Renters versus home ownership is a discussion that we'll need to have.
I like the way you just
But maybe not
call it
today.
Yeah, but, no, I agree. It's a controversial one.
It is.
But equally, some new housing research came out from Ahuri in South Australia saying a lot of people actually rent by choice. They really like having the freedom to live where they want to live. If you run a business as well, there's a lot of advantages to renting over home ownership. And not everyone who's renting is just at the lower end of the income spectrum and so on. And I think this is pointing to the changing mix of how our housing and our super kind of works together to set up our future. Now, Alice, I want to know, when you retire, and I know you've got a house full of teenagers right now, and you probably don't even imagine that you will, but when you retire, where do you think you'll live? What sort of house will you be in? Because you raised 3 little kids in a Parisian apartment, right?
Yeah,
like
I
you've
did.
done this full spectrum.
I did. So I sort of feel like I've done everything in the inverse, talking about, often we see retirees moving abroad at the moment.
Yeah.
And I feel like I sort of did all that much earlier on, that the thought of actually travelling as a retiree, I just think I don't have the energy for that. And I've done all that. Do you know what I mean? So when I hear people say that, I'm kind of like, wow. On that note, I just want to get this out there about my sort of disaster. I feel like I need to disclose this to Andrew about my disastrous superannuation. So my husband and I moved to Paris in 2002, 2003. We went for a year or two and gone on a great adventure and sort of forgot to come home. And we're there for about 12 years. Now, my husband is half Swiss, so he has a Swiss passport, so we're employed on local European contracts in both of our jobs. And the French system is delightfully French, and being socialist, the superannuation system there is a pension system that you pay into, and then the government dictates what that is worth on the day you retire based on how many points you have in the system.
Gosh.
Guys, it's like Qantas Frequent Flyer program, but,
On
but
acid.
even more ambiguous.
But they are literally marching in the streets in France
Completely.
over this pension system
Completely.
right now, right?
And they always are. They're just because there is such a sort of sense of entitlement, and I think that's the tension in France. You've got this socialist system that people feel utterly entitled to, no matter where they are in the system. All that to say is that my husband and I have paid into the French system for that 12-year period, which will look sort of measly in the scheme of our whole life.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because we weren't expatriated, we missed out on 12 years of paying super in Australia.
Ah.
And for years, my husband, the actuary, would be like, oh, blah, blah. And I'd be like, oh, Adam, who cares? Let's pass another bottle of Beaujolais and let's just keep living this great life and having children here and being in this sort of wonderful country that, rewards people for having children and has beautiful art and food. And then we got back to Australia with 3 children in tow and didn't even have a house at that point. And we realised that we were sort of like the cobbler's children having the worst shoes, and that our super had just taken a massive dent in what should have been really crunchy years of earning.
Yeah.
We hadn't paid into it, and nor been in the property market as well. So all that to say is, I think the importance of looking ahead and constantly planning, as boring and arduous as it can feel, is not lost on me anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why for most people, the 12% is compulsory. So you don't get a choice to say, no, I'm going to opt out of that.
You don't have to
Something else
think
with it.
too hard about
Exactly.
it, right?
So this next generation, they're coming through, they'll have it for 40 years and they'll get to the end and go, wow.
Well,
Well,
we
that's
hope. We
before-
hope. We hope. That's.
Well, and except if they went overseas.
Yeah, I was going to
So
say.
I was going to say, but even when we think about these adult gap years, and we know that more people in their 20s and 30s are having sabbaticals,
Yeah.
and it can just all change very quickly. That, as I said, you meet someone, fall in love, and you stay in a country, and you don't
That's
think you're
exactly
going
right.
to, and
That's
that
exactly right.
nest egg is no longer.
So that goes to the gender equity things. And so a lot of the gaps are
For
for
women.
women. So they have a few
Tons
years
of
off
them.
with children, or they work part-time. And so all of the gaps that emerge for women through that. And so there have been different suggestions put out. There's another one by the Coalition recently about equalising
Yes.
superannuation. Look, at the end of the day, we do look at, or superannuation should be looked at the household level.
Yeah, that's right.
And so if one partner, male or female, has taken some time out or substantial time out and has $300,000 and the partner has 1.7, then
Yep.
doesn't collectively we've got 2.
Yeah, that's right.
So you look at it as a household, except
Except
obviously-
people get divorced.
Well, and when they do, it should be split.
Yeah.
it's
50-50.
That is true, and I am on my second spouse, right? I know how arduous this is because it took me 8 years to get a divorce precisely because the super splitting was in contention.
Yeah.
And I had to, that was my first brush with an actuary because I had to get an actuary to crunch the value of a defined benefit fund. And then we had to negotiate for 2 years, and then I had to take court action. So I had to spend $20,000 like getting this to court to find, like, it was actually not very easy.
Yeah, I've got a lived experience with a friend, and I don't think they had much super. He ran his own business, and so probably wasn't doing as much. But
That's another big gap in the market is
It is.
people who run their own
Self-employed.
business. Some years you can contribute and some years you can't, right? That's
and
the nature of business.
keeping the business going is
That's
the main
right.
thing. And when they divorced, did the house and everything else, and I said, now what about the super? And I said, I'm done. I'm done fighting. I'm not going after any of the super. You know, like, so that's an
That's
attitude
very
as well.
common. I've seen that. See, unfortunately, I am the world's biggest pain in the ass, and I just
Every
not-
last bit.
I could not. No, it's my only strength is being a pain in the ass. A lot of people will tell you that.
But it is a challenge with it, isn't it? Like, it's something that can feel so abstract as you're living your life, mindfully thinking,
Yeah.
push hard at work, look after my children,
Yeah.
renovate my house. This abstract notion of
One day.
how much will I need per year, and is it 100K? Is it whatever it might be? But that it feels so abstract, I think, for so many people.
Yes.
So I helped her get some financial advice and reviewed it, but the big thing that we decided, and getting back onto the
Yeah.
housing topic.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of the things that said the biggest thing that you can do is if you've got from the settlement
Yep.
this much money, you're not renting
Yep.
and living off that. You are buying a house, having a mortgage. That'll be exempt from the means test. You'll get the full age pension.
Correct.
And so you will live a much better life if you own a property rather than renting. If you can do that, find a way.
And I think that's the point, because I think even though we've talked about some people are enjoying the freedom of renting as they get older, which I can completely understand.
And living in a better location.
Yeah.
There's now build to rent
Mm.
developments that are actually pretty nice.
But I
Like
think
they're for the upper end of the market, though. Let's
they are.
Not deny it.
yeah.
And I think that's a very different model. But I think if people, as of today, go out rent, you look at what vacancy rates are around the country, and they are on the floor. And I think that emotional instability and psychological instability that can be you left with during a point of time in your life where you might have health
stability
challenge.
matters.
You know, I just think that idea of bricks and mortar is actually quite appealing to a lot of people for that very reason. Like
So
that
there was
example.
one story that came through talking with people in the industry about annuities,
Yep.
and
Oh, yes.
one of the classic parts of that story is like, we have maybe put enough aside so that the annuity will give you guaranteed income to cover your needs.
Before you get into annuities, can you explain what they are? Because an annuity versus a pension is sort of the way most normal people would think of it, right? You can turn a lump sum into a pension, but an annuity or a fixed income stream is slightly different. Can you just explain that nuance first?
Well, for all intents and purposes, so there's the age pension.
Yep.
The government pays that, and that's a
30
regular
grand a
income
year or
stream.
so. Yep.
So an annuity, and there's different types, and we can go through some
Many
of
different
those. But at
types.
the end of the day, they will pay an income stream like a pension, and it will be paid until you die.
That's right.
Now, depending on the type of annuity, the income amount can be guaranteed, or it could fluctuate with investment returns. But at the end of the day, it will continue to be paid no matter how long you live. So sometimes they're used as part of
It hedges the risk of longevity.
it hedges the longevity. Yes, it does. It takes that out of the equation,
Yeah.
at least for your financial needs.
Yep.
And if you've want to spend more than that, and you can afford to, then you can invest that money some other way to pay for your wants. So
okay.
quite often the needs are
that's-
covered by the annuity, and the wants are covered by an account-based pension.
And that could be a good way for everyday people to think about it, right?
Absolutely.
Because all of us want to have the basics covered. And that's the bit that's so abstract. We can't work out how, if we live on, a combined household income of, 200 grand a year today, and we're paying a mortgage and we've got teenagers at home, we can't imagine that time when there's no kids at home and when, I don't know, you may choose to live in the same house or not, but you can't compute how it will work.
So there's one situation that came up as a story in a conversation like this, and the lady, I think she'd be widowed or might have been divorced, but she said, I want to buy an annuity to cover my mortgage repayments in retirement. So then I know I'll never be kicked out of my home. That was the only thing she wanted to be certain of. The rest, I can manage the risks around everything else. I just
Wow.
don't want to ever be
want my house.
homeless.
I love that clarity that she could just actually drill it down to that.
One thing.
Because you can sort of imagine, can't you, that it's like, if nothing else, surely the neighbour next door, there's always Meals on Wheels, or someone will help me if I'd needed it, except just providing that roof over our head was kind of it.
So that's, you said the word security, and that, like, people want to be able to say, I go to bed at night and I know that I'm in my safe haven and I'll
Yep.
never lose this no matter what.
Yeah. And because we know that more people will be heading into retirement with mortgages, I mean, Alice, house prices, how much have they gone up since you've been a property
it's
editor?
revolting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's revolting looking at that growth when you think about younger generations into the market. If you're an owner,
It's great.
I
You
think
think it's
I think
fantastic.
that's the uncomfortable truth about the affordability issue in this country at the moment is that for a lot of people, this is the golden time of like people rubbing their hands together, and they're doing it quite discreetly because they've made so much money out of property, right? And at the same time, they sort of, those people probably think, well, my kids will be okay because I'll end up giving them that money down the track, and we've got this sort of Jane Austen scenario of intergenerational wealth.
It's very Jane Austen,
right? Like, and if you don't have that, that's the challenge. And I think, that's the tension that we're all in at the moment.
So the classic situation for property, and only like thinking about like other investments, is that you really should be getting a 3% yield from a property investment and 3.5% capital growth. That's a 6.5% return, which is consistent with what you might expect to get, a bit less than from a stock in the stock market.
Yep.
But in the last 20 years,
It's been
or 25
way
years,
higher.
you've actually got a 6.5% capital return
Yeah, that's right.
on top of the yield. And so with wages growing at 3.5%, capital growing at 6.5%, now this is the gap between wages.
Yep.
And this was why the French became socialists, because
And
capitalism
they all-
was evil.
They all took to the streets for this very reason, right?
Well, we've gone through this period, and so there's, we've had zoning issues and the ability to get property developed quickly. And then interest rates have dropped from all-time highs of like 18, 19% in the early 90s to 0% in
Yeah.
COVID. And so when interest rates drop, what happens to prices?
Yeah, exactly. They just go
And
berko.
we're seeing that play out right now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the market's often racing again because we've also had this pent-up demand.
As we know, though, the property market doesn't behave homogeneously. It's not like a share market, right? Like it's very different from suburb to suburb, even within the suburb. And, just this week we had all that climate data come out showing, whole swaths of Australia will likely be potentially unlivable. And it's not that far away. I mean, it certainly is long term. It's not going to happen tomorrow. When will this madness kind of change?
I think there needs to be sort of a shift psychologically, Alex, because I still think people will still buy in high-risk areas, even aware of the risks of climate change.
Whether it's bushfire or flood or whatever it might be.
and we've seen that play out in the past year or so, particularly in New South Wales and in Queensland.
Byron Bay is still one of the most expensive areas in
And that's it.
Australia.
And you see these prices go like that. And people, I think maybe it's part of our sort of Australian way of life that we just sort of think, oh, well,
She'll be
she'll
right.
And I don't know that people have that much reliance on the government per se, but I just think that it's the conundrum for people is also, well, what else can I afford? And we also have this sort of idealistic approach to where we live, that we don't often want to live far from where we've grown up or where we've sort of hung our hat for a number of years. So we get quite emotional about it. And I think that people are like, oh, well, I'll pay the price of living in a higher risk area if it means I can be near my sisters and my best friends and yada, yada, yada. And there is a high price to pay, and sometimes the most extreme sense, life or death.
Well, that's frightening, isn't it?
So we have made some adjustments. So if you're now wanting to build in a forest,
Yep.
then the building codes require
Fireproofing.
fireproofing and all sorts of other things. And
It'll cost you 4 times as much to build.
Absolutely.
And the real issue, though, is the insurance of your house. So as an actuary, there's already big swaths of Australia that are pretty much uninsurable. When I was editing Choice, up in the tropics, some people were paying $40,000 a year to try and insure their house. Now, that's only going to get higher, right?
Yeah. Or some people live without insurance.
Yeah.
Some people just
Many
say,
now live without
oh,
insurance
well,
because
it's
of
not
this.
worth it.
Yeah.
so the flood-prone areas, we haven't changed the building codes for floods, by the way. We have for fire, but not
Yeah,
for flood.
but not for floods.
And so how do we mitigate flood risks? And so the Northern Rivers region in New South Wales, there's people probably should be relocated to other areas and given incentives to do
Buybacks.
so. And the buybacks. So who pays for the mitigation? But if insurance premiums are $30,000 a year, and they go, well, that's unaffordable. So if something happens, I just hope the government bails me out. Like that's essentially what will happen.
People are just saying.
Is that the government and the taxpayer becomes the insurer of last resort,
But
which
will
means
they?
why the government. Well,
Will they?
that's
Is
the
kind of
question.
the question.
So this goes to where the actuarial side comes in. So what is the cost of making good later
good on
on
that.
versus what's the cost of mitigating up front? So if we had to.
Can you crunch that model for us? Just, I'll give you 5
Somebody
seconds.
can. There's an actuary out there who does this. It's in the general insurance area, they do this all the time, and the reinsurers will have this. And so all the data is available to say, well, this is what the costs will look like. If we instead of spending $200 billion after it happens. Why don't you spend $30 billion building a wall to stop it happening
Yeah, correct.
or stopping the impacts of it happening?
And I think also when you think about governments and their intervention in that, it's also, and I'm going down a bit of a different path here, but this idea also of, well, what are governments doing to really genuinely trying to move the needle on making home ownership more obtainable for younger people?
Yeah.
Because if they're not, that becomes a problem that just gets kicked down the road that we're experiencing now, right?
It's all
And I know the government would argue, well, we're offering this and that, but we know what all that does. It just stimulates the market.
totally.
Why aren't we looking at things like, dissolving stamp duty or replacing it with a longer term land tax? I mean, there are other things that one can do.
Other levers.
Encouraging downsizing more profoundly than what's happening now.
So the downsizing conversation is really interesting because the research I read yesterday, which I sent to Andrew, said something like 80% of people do not plan to downsize in retirement. They absolutely plan to live in their own house, forever and ever, amen. As Rachel Lane and Stephen Huppert sort of said, everyone has this sort of delusion that you retire, you live in your house, and then one day you just die in your sleep.
Yep. Did it talk about the reason why, Alex?
No, it just talks about intentions, right? And that's this mental model problem we've got around abstract stuff for the future that we haven't come to terms with is very hard for us to deal with as a risk, right? As human beings, it's hard for us to think about it.
And I think often the main reason why is financial.
Yep.
It costs too much to move.
Yep.
And
I would agree.
What I want to move to does not exist. So people want to move to, a lower maintenance style apartment or a townhouse or something with an oversized courtyard, a place for their grandkids to stay, et cetera, et cetera. We can talk more about that if we need to. But my point is, and they also want it in the area that they are now often
with. Yeah.
And therein lies the problem. So we look at what is happening in Victoria and New South Wales in particular. All this massive supply is going to hit the market.
Yeah.
That'll be a nice problem to have. It will eventually hit the market.
Yes.
But is it the right type of supply that people want to live in?
Yeah. Big
And what do you mean by that? Like you're talking about the high-rise apartments versus...
And is it a two-bedroom apartment with a courtyard or is it big enough?
And I think a lot of people, particularly downsizers, are sort of concerned about the idea of sort of body corporate and like these things spook
for good
people,
reason.
right? And I think if there are...
There's been strata disasters
in
Australia.
There are other options. There are other ways of living. And I think in my ideal world, there is a mix of everything.
Yeah.
So that...
But what do you want to live in? What are you and your actuary husband, thinking about?
I actually think there's a gap in the market. And if I ever win the lotto, I'll call you two and we'll sort of hash this out. But I don't know why there's not more more buildings or sort of communities done in a beautiful way that aren't basic and meat and three veg style and make you feel depressed and not want to live.
Yeah.
But a more that sort of like that Nightingale model, which is that sort of
Yep.
really instilling this sort of sense of community in a building, beautifully, thoughtfully designed, sustainably designed.
Yeah.
And areas that you can dip in and out. Like you look at buildings that were built in the 1920s. We've got beautiful buildings in South Yarra, for example, and they were designed without elevators at the time, but these sort of generous stairwells to encourage conversations between neighbours.
Yep.
And I look at how we lived in Paris and we had all these old people in our building and every day they'd walk up and down in the boulangerie. If they couldn't move, they'd just come to us next door and say, I'm not feeling well, can you please go and get my baguette? And this sort of touch point that you have with people all the time, I think is absolutely crucial. So I love the idea of actually community living.
Beautiful apartment.
If I can live in the right sort of building and I don't have to smell your chicken teriyaki cooking, Alex.
And what's with the cauliflower smell in apartment?
You know what it is? It's bad design.
Yeah,
it's not getting engineering right when they're constructing a building because they want to keep the cost down.
So because of Paris, you mentioned a couple of times now.
Yeah.
7 stories.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Height limits.
That's it.
I'm like living in a 35-story apartment doesn't turn me on at all.
No.
But a 5 or 6 story.
You're okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
And with large windows and balconies
Light
and
a view. That's one thing about living in a family home.
Yeah.
Is that you got a back fence.
Yep. And it's your nest.
Because we have downsized into an apartment.
Oh, you have?
And we now have a view looking out over the leafy suburbs of Melbourne, and you go. And you wake up in the morning, rather than seeing your back fence, I'm now seeing the Dandenongs and a view, and you go, how good is this?
Nice.
So you don't. So whilst you're in an apartment, it still feels open and spacious.
Yeah.
Because of the view.
But those apartments, they are expensive. It's not a cheap option. And I think you're exactly right, Alice, is that most people are like, well, I'll pass some of my wealth to my kids so my kids will be okay. But none of us are thinking collectively about everybody's kids being okay, because someone's going to have to pay to wipe our bums if we do end up in residential aged care, right? And we need those young people to feel housed and safe and willing to do those jobs. But no one really thinks of that. Maybe we need to be more like Parisians and get our fluoro vests and march on the
And
streets,
take to the streets.
and start doing some more. You do that a lot more in Melbourne than we do in Sydney. You love a bit of a street march in Melbourne.
Yep.
In Sydney, they're too busy, I don't know, drinking margaritas, looking at the
There's a
harbour.
few people,
Front.
there's a few people on the bridge the other week, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's true, which was
Sydney is geographically so much better for a protest, isn't it, though?
because we can lock off a whole
You can block
bridge.
it off, you know what I mean? Whereas Melbourne at the moment, look at the poor CBD of Melbourne. I mean, that's the other
Well,
thing.
there's nothing better, though, for an international news broadcast. to say there was a protest in
right.
Sydney
That's
on the
right.
Harbour Bridge.
True,
Because-
Check
true,
this out.
True.
Because you can get the shot. And
Yeah.
it's now that we live in this age of so much misinformation, there's so much information coming at you.
Yeah.
One clear story is so much more powerful than it used to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's why that Sydney protest happened. I mean, the Premier did his very best to stop it. But it worked, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Melbourne, you have protests nearly every
Well, and
weekend.
most businesses in the city are on their knees.
Oh, God.
Like, they are just, the stories coming out of it are absolutely horrendous. Like, restaurants,
course.
retail has just been decimated.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, it's
But is
just
that because
another-
politicians aren't doing their jobs and listening? Like, you know, sort of holding people to account. It's an
Yeah,
interesting...
I feel like it's sort of the canary in the coal mine. I mean, I don't want to get into Melbourne too much, but it is this issue, I think, in Melbourne that the city has been neglected. It still didn't really come back after COVID, and now it's had this whack to it. I mean, I think it's horrendous. I think that there needs to be I mean, again, like not propping up the economy is detrimental to all
Everybody.
everybody.
Yeah, everybody. And going back to that, when you're imagining your super and your retirement, you don't know what sort of economy it's going to be. You have no idea what the markets are going to do. And you equally have no idea what your health or longevity is going to do. All of us are very statistically likely to live a hell of a lot longer than we used to. I have the statistics. It's something ridiculous. So average lifespan might be in your 80s, right? But that actually means nothing, because Australian life tables, invented by an actuary, are these things that sort of give you the likelihood of how long you're going to live. And the older you get, the more likely it is you're going to live even longer, is statistically how it works.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us about that?
Well, I think there's also going to be a two ends of a spectrum you're talking about here as well, because averages is one thing, but that's misleading.
Yes.
So
Fallacy of averages.
it is. So look, and it's one thing. It's another unfortunate outcome from the wealth
the
effect
wealth
that we've been
effect.
talking about. Is that a few years ago I looked at some studies, probably 20 years ago, I looked at a study in the UK because they had a lot more pensioner data than we had in Australia, and that the wealthiest 20% lived about 3 years longer
Yeah.
than everybody else.
Oh, that's a bit depressing.
Well, it gets worse because that was 20, 30 years ago, but now that has grown. And so in Australia, we've now got data coming out ourselves, and so the wealthiest 20% are living a lot longer, and the poorest 20%, there might be a gap of 5 or 6 years difference between the wealthiest and the poorest 20% of our community. Now, the poorest 20% will largely live off the age pension, as I
That's
said
right.
earlier. So they're taken care of. The wealthiest 20%, whilst you say the average might be age 85 and 25% of you might get through to age
numbers
90
now.
or 92, the wealthiest will live another 5 or 6 years on top of that.
Wow.
Well, there's
So they got to make their money last to 98.
even longer.
Yeah.
Well, there's a new Mercer retirement calculator, and it actually calculates to 102. But
Wow.
I've got the numbers now in front of me. So a woman at age 65 has a 50% chance of living to 91. So that's way beyond the 80s. She has another 25% chance of living to 96 and a 10% chance of living to 99.
Wow.
And if she's wealthy,
It'll
add a
be
few more
longer.
years.
It'll
Add
be
a few more years
110.
on.
Yeah, it could be 110. They say that we're going to see someone.
and this
who's
is
got
all because of the
110
way
this
they
decade.
eat and see a
after
doctor and
themselves.
look after themselves. They can afford to look after themselves, and they
And
live
get a knee
longer.
replacement when their knees dicky. And like you can see it now. Like there's wealthy women in their 50s still look like they're in their 30s because they can get the You know, they can pay their $400 a month for their weight loss jabs so they can avoid middle-age spread. And you can see that, you know, women who don't live in as wealthy areas actually look their age, and you can see the marked difference. And so for men, those stats, a man at 65 has a 50% chance of living to 89, which is still a lot higher than most men would imagine, and a 10% chance of living to 98. So this whole idea of our longevity is actually something to think about, because what we talked about with the Rachel Lane and Stephen Huppert podcast is that you need to start thinking, so we go up the hill as we accumulate for super and buying a house, right? Generally speaking. We're all very good at that in Australia because we've got enforced savings with super and we're property obsessed. So many of us try to buy a house, even though it's not as big a house as we might have been able to buy 30 years ago. So we're very good at getting up the hill, but coming down the hill, it's too abstract. We don't understand it. We don't engage with it. And we talked about, I thought there were only two phases, which was like the go-go years where, you know, you might get your caravan and go touring around Australia, and then the sort of go-slow years, because the ASFA figures break your suggested spending into those two things. You will spend less in the go-slow years once you're about 82 because, you know, your knees really do hurt then. And, you know, you've got a few more issues and you don't really want to go as fast as you did when you were in your 60s. But then Rachel Lane brightly pointed out to me with a smile on her face that there's also the no-go years, which no one wants to talk about. Dementia is the leading cause of death of women already in this country. None of us want to think about that. It's frightening to think about it. Now, who is going to look after you if you have dementia? You know, how are you going to pay for that care? So that the no-go years, so you've got go-go years, go-slow years, and no-go years to think about. And how does your money pan out over those? That's sort of interesting because if you're in the no-go years, I mean, Denise Drysdale said she just wants access to a Dunlop pillow and for someone to put it over her head. You know, she wants to be able to determine the no-go time herself. And I would argue a lot of people sort of want to do that. And we have voluntary assisted dying laws, but not really for dementia because you have to be of sound mind. How do you fund this? Come on, actuary.
How do you fund this? So the cost of aged care is going to more than double over the next 50 years.
Wow.
Because we're going to have more older people,
Well,
bottom line.
are we going to have anyone working in aged care to do it? That's the real question, right?
And after it doubles, then Andrew, does it go down again? Like, is that sort of the
Have you modelled this?
boomer explosion? Like, and then
Well, no, I don't think it does because
so it stays high, basically.
It does because basically we've had the wave of the baby boomers come after the Second World War.
Yeah.
And those whilst birth rates have declined since then, you know, the size of the following generations, the millennials and so forth, they're a similar sized generation to the baby boomers because they've had four kids. They all each had three. They all had two.
Yeah.
But there's a big wave of people still coming through, plus with migration on top of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we'll be
Okay.
out.
So with all of that balancing it out, it might drop
You better
off
get
a
used to
little
it,
bit.
basically, though. Yeah.
But it's a high cost.
The
So-
market will adapt.
And I've got to deal with this because my dad, I've got two problems.
Yeah.
One is longevity, the other is dementia. My dad died with Alzheimer's at
I'm
94,
so sorry.
and his mother died of Alzheimer's when she was 94. So they both lived in their mid-90s, but with Alzheimer's for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
So look, they were both in aged care facilities
It's still very
For a number of
hard.
years.
for a number of years.
It's very hard.
And
It
not
is
to be
hard.
indiscreet, but how does that work financially then? Like in that instance, was that
Well,
or for the average person?
Yeah, this is the great thing about aged care, is that I said this at a meeting with some clients earlier this week at a strategy day. People think about aged care twice in their life,
Yep.
putting their parents in
Correct.
and going in themselves.
Yep.
And they start thinking about it 2 weeks before they do it.
Well, it's usually in a hospital car park, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it's
Oh shit! I missed that window of this happening, and now I'm here.
Yeah.
You do not plan for it.
That's
In
correct.
4 years' time, I think I might go into aged
yeah.
Let's do some investigation and find out what
Start
that
some
means.
research.
Talking about
Have a
abstract
bit.
models, yeah. No one
No,
thinks about
it is
going
a
into
last
aged care.
resort.
Yeah, that's right.
And
And an emergency
it's an
usually
emergency situation. And
But can be really costly.
it's
can be.
and you got to make decisions.
Yeah.
So do I fund it using equity from the house and have a
RAD, yeah,
or do
which
I
is a residential accommodation
deposit, or do I just pay it out of the income from the age pension or whatever else? The RAD is actually probably the more expensive way to do it, but it's the simplest because most people say I'll just use the equity.
Yeah,
component.
I'll just take my home, transfer it into my aged care costs. Yeah.
But overall it's probably more efficient
I
to just
love
pay
that,
the
Therese.
the income as you go.
And side
If you,
note,
if you
side
can
note,
afford it.
side note, your 4 kids are getting a little bit less in their inheritance when you're doing that also, though.
And your kids
You know what I mean? So it's
are likely making the decisions. That's what's so frightening about
that is a
it.
conflict of interest.
So this is what we talked earlier about the health and aged care
Correct.
conversation. Is another one down the track, is that the cheaper model for most situations is to have in-home care for
That's
as long
right.
as you can, because hospitalisation and residential aged care are expensive models.
They are expensive
so
models.
if you can afford to have carers come in to do things for you
at home.
at home,
It's
it's
much
generally
better.
cheaper.
But so hard. And given that your kids are likely the people making the decisions about your care, and if they haven't got a house, they're going to make decisions that are different to kids who are financially secure and actually love you for you. And, I've got kids, they don't always love me for me. Back to that pain in the ass thing. They don't, and you couldn't blame them really. If you live in a dog-eat-dog world, you'll make dog-eat-dog decisions, right? And I think what we talked about in some of our previous podcasts is that if you sort of move into this community living type of model and you're living with other people making these types of decisions, the model's not so abstract and you can actually plan for it a little bit better if you see it around you. But the way we do it now is that we just deny it even exists.
Oh, and we also, I think, miss the window of when it's possible and plausible. So I think, Andrew, you'll have to fill in stats if you know any, but I don't, like the window when you're thinking even about downsizing, there's a time in your life when you're sort of fit for it, ready to go,
Yes.
primed.
And that's still in your go-go years. So that's
what
the
I mean.
issue,
And
is
I
you
think-
don't know the go-go to no-go time frame for you.
That's right. And then I think, if you get to that sort of second or third wave that you're talking about, Alex, your capacity, your mental clarity and all that, it's all too hard. I mean, like, even buying a house is just hard anyway, right? Let alone if
doing
you've
it when
got
you're compromised.
dementia or you've been recently widowed or, you've had huge change in your life or developers knocking on your door saying,
Oh,
"We're
I'll
gonna
offer you
build it."
$3 million.
That's what, bundle up with your neighbours. Like the complexity of it is quite revolting, isn't it?
So I was really lucky that Dad found the garden too hard. and
that
said,
was
I've
lucky.
I've had enough.
That was lucky.
And so it's time for us to downsize.
Yeah.
So they made the call. And once Mum and Dad made the call, well, they found a residential community.
Yes.
Yep, an over 55s type
Yeah,
place.
and
Is
they
that
were in
what
there
you mean?
within 2 months.
Wow,
They've
that's
just
really
sold the
quick.
house, done this, we're in, and we're
Yes.
off. Great.
Wow.
And so they had this house they owned in the residential community, not far from where they live. 'Cause
Yep.
that's another issue about you
Yes.
talked about
Location.
Yes.
location and having
Very
a community that you're familiar with and
Well, and
people
your
around
doctors and your shops.
your whole
Yeah.
life.
Yep.
Yep.
And so they moved in and they had a bowling green and a
Yeah.
restaurant mate. So on Friday nights they could go there and have a drink with other people in the community. And so there was life happening there. And there was people in there who were 59 and people in there who were
99.
71. And, so, and then up the back
Was the more high dependency
Was the
type
aged
care.
care.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
and
My
Mum-
grandparents
Mum's
were in
still
one of those.
there. But they basically moved from here up to there.
Yeah.
And so when Dad went in but Mum didn't have to, she was only a short walk.
Exactly. So she
So
could
when you're
have
a
her
couple-
meals with them. And this is the other conundrum. If you are in a couple, it's much cheaper to retire. It's more efficient. It's the single, and they're usually women, single women actually bear the highest costs of retirement. But when you're planning this aged care transition, it's not so easy when one partner needs the care and the other one doesn't qualify, because how do you make that decision? And do you want to factor that into your retirement planning? Because again, that's not something in our abstract models that we're thinking about. If you have to nurse your partner through, dementia is a very long journey of care. And it can be supported. There's a really good website called Violet, and I urge you to tune into a podcast we're doing very soon about aged care. But how do you think about when your partnership might change?
And I think that's why, for me, the idea of the concept of in-house care is kind of, the most
Ideal.
Yeah, because you're in your own environment, whatever that is, and hopefully you have downsized, and you do it on your own terms in your own space, so that one person provides the care, gets the care that they need, and the other person, is in their own cocoon, I guess.
But subject to this, your houses, if you have someone come into care, you need a very large bathroom
Mm-hmm.
with a very wide door, no bathtubs. No one's getting you in and out of a bathtub.
Well, and heaven forbid stairs. Heaven forbid a veranda, period home, right? Like, I mean, we all, and the
These are
more
the
sort of design
issues.
centric we all become, the more kind of complex we become in our architecture, right? And I think that's a really valid point.
So accessibility and universal design are features that aren't widely prized, especially in real estate photos. And they really should be, right? Because a hallway that's just that little bit wider could accommodate someone living at home for another 5 to 10 years versus having to go into a residential aged care
And therein
situation.
lies the problem, I think, with a lot of sort of more cookie cutter style apartments
That's
in
right.
particular. That the
They're
hallways
not
just-
applying those universal
nothing.
design principles.
you know, so I think that's when we need to be more thoughtful about what we're designing in that space and ensure it's meeting the needs of the community.
So you've talked about the availability of suitable homes.
Homes,
So like, you know, the people who are going to die in their 5-bedroom home
Yeah, well,
alone.
that's where most of them will.
So how do we free up those? Because you know you've got a 2-year-old child
Yeah.
that needs a bath,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
but I'm living in an apartment without a bath. And then there's this person over there who's 83 years old living in a 5-bedroom home with a bath.
Yeah.
So I do
And
know
3 bedrooms upstairs, which they can't get to.
I do know of families that have literally swapped, where they've literally gone, we'll flip it. And there's another family I know where the daughter is disabled and she's got 2 kids, and the parents willingly built their own granny flat so they could be close by to help, and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of that self-insurance. That's what an actuary would call that, right? There is
And
a
I think
bit of
that's
that
why
going
there's
on.
that appeal. Like we saw it rise through divorce of people sort of nesting, you know, keeping the one family home.
I know.
And then, you know, the kids stay there when the partners
Yeah.
come in and out of that house, right?
That's right.
And I like that idea a lot, except I worry about sort of the emotional instability of not having your own place, like for the adults involved. Like it's
Yeah.
good for the kids, I acknowledge. And then we think also about this multi-generational living. And I think we are seeing different iterations of it with granny flats. We're also seeing it with sort of downsizes like, well, the kids and their kids have that part of the house. I'll move here. And the teenagers move there. And they're all sort of flipping and flopping a lot. And there are some incredible examples actually of architects who have done this through, you know, it looks sort of like something out of Harry Potter, like amazing sliding walls and windows, and through clever design you can actually do it.
Yeah.
It's the cost involved
That's right.
and the ability, I think, for people to think outside the box, I guess, with it. But there are options, but they're often at the moment very expensive.
And so, what sort of housing, in an ideal world, would we have available in our capital cities? You know, let's just fantasize. We've talked about some of it. What sort of housing would be better for a population that's getting older and that needs more young people to be able to afford to buy into the market?
Yeah, I think more lower density and definitely courtyards and balconies. I love the idea of communal laundries. People will disagree with me, but I love that idea of like almost, again, going back another century of like people coming together like at the bathhouse. Like Nightingale even has a bathhouse in their building.
Yeah.
And I love that idea though.
Did you have communal laundries in Paris?
No, but we had this washing machine under the sink.
Oh, like Britain. Same
Yeah.
thing. I've lived in buildings with communal laundries.
And so have I. And when I mean, in my 20s, it was awful, right? Awful.
People get so angry.
But
at
again, I think
communal
if
laundries.
you're with like-minded people, though, and this is what it goes back to. So
Okay.
if you're anally retentive like me about your laundry, and I'm like, Alex, I trust you. It's raining today. Can you grab my sheets when it
Yes,
starts
that's
raining?
true.
Because we're friends. We've got a community in that arrangement.
I understand
right?
you have your pegs in a
I
certain
do,
way.
and please don't. You know, so again, it's like-mindedness, right? I think sort of not having lots of stairs, and I think is an incredibly important part because I think that also is challenging for young families, the stair factor.
It is when you got a pram, right?
You know what I mean? Like that's another part of it.
So you talked about how horrible it was when you're younger.
Yep.
But we were looking then for speed and convenience.
Yep.
So I've
Yep.
got so many other things to get done today, and now I've got to go down there, and it's busy, and I have to wait. But when you're 70
Yeah.
and you're looking for company, and you got all the time in the
true.
world, what's
That's
wrong
true.
with going downstairs to do the washing and
Yeah.
waiting and having a chat to someone for a few hours and
It'd
maybe
be
put a
r-
bar in
yeah.
next to it and have a drink with them?
But it would
You
be
know?
even better if all those people would do all the busy people's laundry. Oh my God, how good would that be?
Well, there's another
joking.
model.
It's hybrid
joking.
living.
Well, that's another model though as well, is that how you bring a community, if you're going to have level,
Yep.
that, you know, like in our apartment, we downsized to, there's a I don't know, she's probably in primary school, 7 or 8 years old,
yeah,
little girl. And she
cute.
says hello and she chats.
Yeah, they're so
And
cute.
so it is having multi-generational people living together. There's a lot to be said for that.
There
too.
is.
And I think communal dining spaces, like I love this idea. And, you know, a lot of the newer developments now will have apps where you can book it all out. So if you only want your people with you,
Yes,
you can
do
have
that.
you can do that. But I sort of love that idea of, and also communal gardens and rooftop spaces. I'm a massive fan of that.
What about communal chickens? 'Cause
We
that's
haven't actually seen that as a unique selling point in a house, Alex, but it could be coming. Harry and Meghan could be onto something, right, with their chicken coop.
yeah.
Um,
Chickens are big, right?
yeah, but you do think of like neighbourhood gardens and stuff like that. And I do love that idea of people coming together more than going away, and I think
Yeah,
that is part of the answer.
So one thing that stops all of this happening,
Yeah.
there's many, but it's the frictional costs. You talked before about stamp duty and other things
Yeah.
and the like. Is so each time, and I don't know how people did it. That each time you move, you're paying back in the day 7 or 8%, but now it might be 5 or 6% stamp duty.
But it's hundreds of thousands
Hundreds
of
of
dollars.
thousands
And you do that every 7 years. No, I mean we lived in our family home for 27 years
Yep.
because I wasn't paying that for anybody.
Yeah.
Of course, you're an actuary.
But if you weren't paying it though, Andrew, do you think you would have moved earlier? If I said there's no cost in moving other than the removalist truck
and the hassle.
and the hassle,
Probably not, because we had a great community. We had drinks on Friday night with the neighbours across the
Yeah,
road. The four houses all
And
had
you raised your
kids the
kids
same
there.
age.
Yep.
And dare I say it, the mums got together at 5 o'clock on a Friday and they all had.
Bit of wine.
Someone made dinner for all
Oh,
the kids.
yeah.
Oh, it's
Which
so
So
lovely,
someone
yeah.
did kids,
Yeah,
9
exactly.
kids.
Exactly.
And they had a drink and had a chat.
Yeah.
So it was a community. And so we would never have moved away from that until we had to. But like that's, frictional costs
Yeah.
are a huge problem.
I asked because I would move now. Like my children are 20, 18, 16, and I would move now. We would move now if we weren't paying stamp duty.
Yeah.
Because I'm sort of just,
And also
I'm
your
sort of a
house
bit
is
bored,
big,
and
right?
it's a bigger house, and I'm
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like, and I love it. It's not that, but I'm ready for. I also
Ready for
love
a
sort of moving.
Yeah.
But
ready
why would
for
you want to flush $50,000, $70,000, $100,000 down the toilet?
It will be
Well, yeah.
hundreds of
Well, and also,
thousands.
and what I want to buy, I become like this, what we call sideways movers. Like
Yeah.
people upsizing, downsizing, like just moving sideways, and
Yeah, to
and then
something different.
some.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before we've got to wrap up soon, but I wanted to say, Andrew, age pension is something we talked about last time. You believe that's one of the biggest misconceptions and misunderstandings in retirement planning. This is what you told me last time we chatted. Can you tell me why you believe that? The age pension, the government age pension is
Yes.
what I'm talking about.
Well, so there's thresholds to become eligible for it, and like I think there's a wild held belief that we shouldn't, we should be self-supporting ourselves and not falling onto the age pension.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, I don't want to be a bludger on the government
Exactly right. But then again, it's there. We've funded it.
for a
The
reason.
cost of the age pension to the Australian taxpayer is currently 2.3% of GDP, and because of superannuation and other savings increasing, will fall to 2% of GDP over the next
That's pretty good.
30 years. Whereas overseas, the cost of
Yeah,
their
it's
age
just
pension
going
is
up and
going
up
up to 8, 9, 10%. So it's affordable for the government and the taxpayers to have it. What we see is a lot of people who are eligible for it don't apply for it straight away.
That's right. You've got
So
to
that-
apply just before your birthday at 67
You
if
probably
you're
start-
eligible.
Start thinking about it 6 months before.
Yeah.
And so that, because you've got all the information you've got to provide, and people find that a hassle. You've got to provide all your assets and get
It's
it
always a
valued.
hassle.
But it's worth it. It's $30,000 a year.
It sounds a bit like going to public school when your kids are young.
Yeah.
And you've got this great primary school across
Just
the road
down
from
the
where you
road.
live. It costs nothing.
But you don't choose.
And parents like, oh, should I or shouldn't I? Almost. Do you know what I
no,
mean? And your point is you're entitled to it.
Yeah.
We've paid taxes. You do you know what I mean?
And the
So-
French march in the street to get theirs.
But what people also will misunderstand is that
Most of us are going to rely on it.
when you start
Most
off
of us.
retirement and you have $1 million in super, good luck. That's fine. You're not eligible for the age pension.
That's right. But you'll spend it
But as
down.
you spend it down, in 4 years' time, you've now got $830,000. You're now eligible for some age pension.
That's right.
And so most Australians, probably 80% of Australians, will end up at some point in their retirement being eligible for at least a part age pension.
That's right.
And-
80% of us currently
Wow.
are. It's
yeah.
very high.
But you have to open that gate before you turn
and no one
67.
understands it.
See, and it doesn't get backdated.
That's right.
So
So you got to understand.
So there's no harm in just signing up and saying, here I am,
Yep.
here's my papaperwork.
Yep.
That's the paperwork
You're not
worth
eligible
doing.
today, but you've got the
But
paperwork
and you
ready.
never know, obviously, what could happen.
And this is like the aged care assessment stuff as well. You've got to be in the system to take advantage of the system with aged care. So you've got to get an ACAT assessment before you need it is the reality.
Actuaries need to have a campaign out there.
Yeah, they
marketing
do.
campaign. Like,
So,
Actuaries sort your life.
so I
in
said
one easy risk.
before that, in 20 years' time, 60% of people will have more than $500,000 in super.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say $500,000. Divide that by 20. That's $25,000 a year.
Yep.
It'll roughly fund for the rest of your life, plus the age pension. You won't get the full age pension, but between the two of those things, for most of your life, you'll now have a $50,000 a year income.
Pretty good.
Some from the age pension, some from your own money. Not 25. You can double that with the age pension. That
Yep.
changes your life.
It's absolutely life-changing. The other thing I wanted to get in before we wrap is the world-changing view that you do go into retirement with a mortgage. A $1 mortgage maybe, but tell us about this, Andrew.
So we've talked. I wrote an article last year on more than just a roof.
Yep.
So the role of the home
Housing.
and getting a reverse mortgage later in life
Very
to help
common.
fund some things.
There's the Housing Equity Access Scheme run by the government as well,
Yep.
so which is a more affordable way to get a reverse
Absolutely.
mortgage.
It's limited to 150% of the age pension. So if you want more than that, then you need to go into the private market, and there's many providers out there now for that. But there's a lot of discussion going on now about how bad it is and how negative it is to go into retirement with a mortgage. Well, but then we're promoting having a reverse
mortgage later
in
down the
life.
track.
I mean, hello.
Yeah, it makes no
What do
sense.
you want? So if you can have a mortgage going into retirement, and let's say the interest rate for that right now might be 5.5% to 6%, reverse mortgages are more like 8%,
Correct.
and you can pay it down as long as you've got a redraw facility and some of those extra features. You can draw it down to $1.
Which you'll pay a monthly fee on, right?
Yeah.
So you might pay your $4, $6 a month to keep a mortgage, but you might only have $1 on your mortgage.
On your
is what
mortgage.
you're saying.
Yeah.
And then
If something happens, if the share market tanks and you don't want to draw money out of your super, you let it recover.
because that's a money risk.
Use your
which-
redraw facility, and that will be you charged interest maybe at 5.5%, but your superannuation over the longer term should be earning 7%.
So you get that.
Now there's a
differential.
timing issue, and then leverage can be dangerous, but I don't think having some access to capital through a mortgage at the start of retirement is such a bad thing. You need to have advice,
Yep.
obviously,
And you need to understand
what you're getting into.
all the things to think about.
But it's just flexibility. Why would you deny
And
that
it's-
extra flexibility for
it's
some part of your life?
It's pretty incredible what you can do with just $1 in a mortgage. You can actually hedge against the money market risk and potentially even the longevity and health span stuff. So when you're trying to make that decision, instead of going to a RAD, you could actually fund it out of a mortgage redraw facility, right? To
Yes.
do the cheaper option that you were talking about in the podcast.
Yeah.
no, I like the sound of that. The only thing I worry about is, again, people not, I'm sorry to keep going back to it, but people not right-sizing.
Yeah.
And people, it almost encourages people to stay in their
Big
huge
house.
nest egg.
Yeah.
Why would I sell my rambling Edwardian house if I think it's actually a great idea, but I just think
I know.
if we promote it, if we see
It's
it
the
sort of playing
socialist
out.
in you,
I
Alice.
know,
I
it's
love
quite
that about you.
ingrained.
And
Well,
we've talked
it's too
about
many
this
years in
off air
Paris.
before
Yeah.
as well. It's just that soon as something is a good idea,
Yeah.
then watch the scammers come.
Yeah, we did talk about that. And they will come. And the scammers could be the people that you're paying to care for you in
Yeah.
your house, who you're also giving your ATM card to buy your groceries because you can no longer go to the supermarket on your own, right? So there's many risks. The world is full of them. The joy is where it becomes well worth it. And it's been really joyous talking to you. So thank you so much for coming on. Like, subscribe and follow The Midlife Shift. The bell should be down below. Thank you, Alice Stoltz from Domain and Andrew Bowl, superannuation guru, Deloitte guru, ASFA guru, all the guru-ness of superannuation and risk. Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
Alex.
you.
How long do
Wow.
I go for? Yeah, so told you I talk too much.
we could probably all be
I
here
know.
all day.
I
couldn't
know.
we?
Just about now.
Yeah, that's all right. We only want an hour. That's
Can I just get you to pick? Can I just pick up your two intro bits again?
Yes. You guys can get up if you really wish. I've just got to find my little thing because I always forget my words.
Do you mean go or just?
No. I want to talk to you before you go. But
I will just sit you going.
you can sit here. Yeah, I've just got to find
Yeah,
my
just
right
for those
thing.
two bits we
I'm
recorded.
so not a pro.
Where's your apartment, Andrew? You in what area of Melbourne?
Um,
Where did your kid? Where's your
Too right, of course he is.
well, it's across the road from Armadale and across the road
Can
from
I
Glen
say
Iris.
that my dream spot is actually like Hawksburn when I
Yeah.
do my
I
move.
know. So
And
we're-
the reason is it's not about the affluence of it.
I
or
don't
anything.
do nothing. I don't know nothing.
Just
Okay.
make sure when you lean forward
That I'm not-
They're still on mine.
We're there.
Okay.
It's a bit.
Okay. Okay.
Just show me again where you.
Edinburgh High Street, the other way.
Yeah. Yeah, that should be good.
Okay, you're watching The Midlife Shift with Alex Brooks. This episode will dive into the smart moves you can make in your 50s to live better in a decade or 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 in retirement. Hit the bell to like, subscribe, and follow The Midlife Shift for all the juicy conversations to thrive in your 50s. You're watching The Midlife Shift with Alex Brooks, and this episode will dive into the smart moves you can make in your 50s to live better in a decade or 2 or 3 or 4 or even 5 in retirement. Hit the bell to like, subscribe, and follow for all the juicy conversations to thrive after 50. Is that enough?
Yeah.
But see how we need more areas.